Hey everyone, Josh Friedlander here from Arisguard. Thanks so much for just taking a few quick minutes to watch this overview ahead of our upcoming kickoff review meeting with you for 2026. If you're watching this, you've likely already been in touch with us and the team here at the office. We're excited to connect with you in a meaningful way as we're getting off to a great new year and starting 2026. And if we haven't connected recently, I hope you had a great holiday and yeah, what a nice start to the year, whether you've been hitting the ground running or easing into the new year with family and friends. Just really excited to catch up with you here personally soon. So, ahead of this discussion, we're going to be covering a lot of ground here. Some of this is going to be a little bit of a review for you. Some of it should be new as well, but this is not meant to be specific advice, but rather just a general educational overview of what I wanted to talk about today. And the goal is just simple. In the short video is just to give you a concise recap of what happened in 2025 across markets with interest rates, inflation, the dollar, precious metals, gold and silver have been in the headlines quite a bit recently. And don't forget about those key tax changes that came about in July of last year as well. So when we meet, the goal really is to make sure that we can spend almost all, if not most of our time focused on you, right? Your goals, your portfolio, the strategy, what your performance is like, your life updates, and how we can keep uh, building wealth your way together here in the new year. And so we'll jump into this. I'm going to keep the video pretty short, about 10 minutes or so. So stick with us and we'll get us prepared for when we do meet live and in person or on Zoom. So anyway, to kick things off here with 2025, we had strong market performance. It really was a year of resilience amid some significant volatility back in April. You may remember we had quite a bit of turbulence when the tariffs were initially announced last year, quite a bit of doom and gloom, but the S&P delivered strong total returns once again, just shy of about 18%, really with growth stocks leading the way in the US markets. And then emerging markets outperforming even more significantly last year at over 30%. We saw a lot of turbulence, some selling off earlier in the year. But if you may remember from when we met back in the fall, our fall reviews in 2025 with you, this was followed by a real powerful rally into new highs, and that continued right through the end of 2025. So ultimately, what rewarded our clients the most and each of you was really staying disciplined, right? Diversification across asset classes, smart rebalancing when opportunities arose, and just most importantly, not overreacting or reacting to every headline, right? Um, for investors that stayed the course and were selective, that really captured some net positive outcomes last year. So even with some bumps along the way, it's just a great reminder that patience and structure win in times of uncertainty. And I think that's going to be a recurring theme here as we head into 2026. So moving on to interest rates, the Federal Reserve continued its easing path in 2025, delivering multiple cuts, including a quarter of a percent reduction back in December of last year, bringing the federal funds rate down to 3.5 to 3.75%. But overall, we saw about 0.75% in reductions in rates through the second half of the year. But for 2026, expectations are a lot more modest, dare I say. Perhaps just one additional cut, at least for the first half of the year. We'll see what happens once the new Fed chair sets in. But it seems like there's going to be a higher bar for further easing, uh, given a cooling, labor market that we're dealing with, but we still have a lot of solid growth. So things are a little bit mixed right now. But lower rates ultimately supported borrowing costs going down in a certain respect. We've seen some ease on the mortgage front, which is a real big driver of what's going on in the housing market. Um, and ultimately, as rates came down, it gave fixed income investors and strategies a little bit of a tailwind, which was nice. So we'll discuss how this plays into your specific allocation and portfolio strategy when we do meet. But if history is any indicator, there's going to be lots of updates along the way, especially as I mentioned before, with the new Fed chair. going to be sitting in the seat here in the next few months. So moving on to inflation, stayed relatively steady. The annual rate held it right around 2.7% through December, got closer to the Fed's ultimate target of 2%, but still a touch above it. Core inflation, excluding food and energy, was about 2.6%. Monthly moves were modest, but food and energy contributing some pressure, but overall stability in the inflation market rewarded investors, I would say. So looking ahead this year, most forecasts are pointing to inflation being similar to what we experienced in 2025 in that 2 to 3% range, which is much more manageable, but certainly worth keeping an eye on with your portfolio as we head into 2026. Now, the US dollar, probably one of, if not the biggest standout stories from 2025 was the US dollar and the precious metals market. The dollar index fell between 8 and 11% last year at different points in time. It was one of its weaker performances in recent history, in part driven by the Fed's rate cuts, some trade dynamics, but just overall broader debasement of the currency concerns were at play. So the result, it really fueled a massive surge in the precious metals market. Gold climbed up dramatically. It was up over 50 to 80% in some measures, surpassing even $5,000 per ounce at the right at the turn of the year. And right around that point, at the time of filming this video, we're still at 5,000 an ounce. But it hit new records with tons of volatility to come with it. And then we saw some bigger pullbacks right before the timing of this webinar as well. And silver was a similar story. We saw even bigger gains and pullbacks in the silver market as well. But these moves just really highlighted the benefits of diversification. So for some of our clients, at least, some thoughtful exposure to metals benefited as a hedge against some dollar weakness. But we'll review your specific exposure and whether some of these adjustments make sense for you going into 2026. Moving on here to taxes, and on the tax front, for a lot of our clients, it ends up being one of their biggest expenses. So this is some huge developments. Last year brought about some meaningful changes through the legislation underneath the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So some key highlights for 2026, the marginal brackets locked in. There was some uncertainty around that at certain points before the passage of the act. Also some other updates, the estate and gift tax exemption rising to around 15 million per person. Great for legacy planning. For some of our clients, that's an ongoing concern for some of you, but even more and more common at the state and local level, this planning is becoming much more relevant for affluent families. Some states, not all, levy a state estate tax or an inheritance tax, and then we've tackled that issue with many of you before, if not, and it is relevant or will become. It's something we're going to want to cover as we lean into 2026. In addition to that, we saw some expanded deductions around things like SALT caps, state and local tax caps, going from 10 to 40,000. There's some phase outs and some exemptions for certain income types as well that we'll want to walk through. But ultimately, it opened up some nice doors for being strategic from a tax perspective, and something we'll want to focus in on with you and your accounting team heading into this year. And for those of you that are business owners, get to take advantage of things like the QBI deduction, right? Qualified business income, bonus depreciation, all of those things on the table. And there's some really interesting strategies that we've seen come about that tie into all of those themes for this year and moving ahead. So ultimately, though, there isn't a one size fits all with this. Opportunities are going to exist across all these different elements of taxation, whether it's capital gains, income, gift and estate planning, you name it. But it all centered upon what your goals are, right? We've got retirement considerations, charitable and philanthropic objectives you might have, and more. So when we do meet, we're going to want to take a close look at how to apply all of this directly to your situation. All right. Um, so positioning for 2026, we're going to build on the wins from last year, right? And some of what benefited us were lower rates, and it looks like the trend's going to continue. Some more stability around inflation has been beneficial, and the tax enhancements. But we're going to want to remain vigilant on risks, right? Or some uncertainty around interest rate pauses, continued dollar volatility. But the key thing is not to abandon fundamentals, especially in times of extreme volatility or if unforeseen events come about this year. So ultimately, discipline and diversification remain the foundation of what we need to do. So our focus going into when we will be seeing you is let's refine your strategy, take a close look at your asset allocation, but ultimately, how does this tie into your goals? What does this look like for your objectives for the future? Are there changes with your life, your career, business, family, your legacy planning goals? All of that needs to be uncovered and reviewed as we meet. So it all ties into the core mantra here. What is it going to take to win, right? What does it mean for you to win the financial game of life? So it's a personalized, disciplined, opportunity-driven approach that ultimately puts you in control and sets you up to build lasting success in good times and even in bad times. So this recap hopefully will set the stage really nicely for when we do meet and have their live conversation with you, where we're going to shift into your unique plan and what's important to you in the months ahead going into the rest of this year. And as you have updates on your end and maybe some new things to share, we'll want to make updates to the plan along the way. So really appreciate you taking some time to watch this and ultimately trusting us with something so important, which is your finances, your impact that you're making for yourself, your family, your future. So what I'd encourage you to do, jot down any thoughts that you have, questions, updates you want to make sure that we cover, share them with us in advance. I'd love to hear from you in advance so we can prepare fully for when we do meet. And we'll dive right into the deep end of the swimming pool when we connect. So looking forward to our meeting and partnering with you to make 2026 your best year yet. So we'll see you soon. And really looking forward to catching up with you here shortly. Thanks.